The cosmos has gifted you a key. The problem with it is that even if you've seen this key before, you have no idea how to use it, and it doesn't work like any other key that you've ever been given before. Today's August 1st, and we have a lot of astrological movement and transits that are happening that are all impacting both each other as well as impacting the greater spiritual story. And I'm going to break it down in this video for today's energy, what you might be experiencing, and how this might be manifesting in your life today as well as over the weekend. Now, I'm Michael the Hierophant. If I've never shown up on your FYP before, I'm a practicing mystic and magi, and I invite you to join me every single Wednesday for consciousness conjunctions and conversations. It's a free astrological divination-based workshop that I hold every single Wednesday at 6:30 Pacific, 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. We get together, we talk about last week's transits, we discuss anecdotal community stories that help you to learn how to interpret energy better, whether it's reading your own chart, reading a future chart, looking at the past, or reading a friend's chart. We also go through the following week's transits, and I teach you what to look for in the energy, how it might manifest in your life. And I think the biggest takeaway that I can offer to my students is teaching you how to learn where you are at in the cosmic narrative, your spiritual story in which you are the main character, always making decisions, always choosing which thread to pull, weaving your own destiny. Even if we all have a path in mind, how we get there is up to us, and we can use the cosmos as a compass in order to lead us along the best or most optimistic and benefic path. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into today's astrology. We're not focusing explicitly on one transit. We're actually going to be focusing on the lot of transits that are happening right now. So I'm going to try to condense this and keep this video under 10 minutes. So please stick around. I promise it'll be worth it. So first, I'm going to list off what transits we're talking about, and then I'm going to go through and break them down elementally, and we're going to discuss the greater spiritual narrative and the implications of all of these transits, all playing off of each other, and how they all correspond with each other in telling our spiritual journey. So today, the moon is in Scorpio, second transit, and it's actually two transits, but we kind of consider them one and the same. Saturn and Neptune are both retrograde in the sign of Aries, and they are squaring Venus, which just entered Cancer. So that's 2 and 3. Number 4, we have Venus in Cancer, Quincuxing Pluto in Aquarius. And last but not least, we have Mars in Virgo, Quincux, Chiron, retrograde in Aries. So with all of those transits listed, what is the story that's being told? Well, if you remember yesterday, we actually had some historical events that predate these transits and will lead us into the story that's being revealed to us. We had a Mercury Cazimi moment, which is when Mercury comes into the heart of the sun and gives us a eureka moment, a light bulb moment. And the day before that, Chiron went retrograde for its annual retrogradation, which will last the next 5 months and allow us to review where our inner and childhood wounds of culmination have not been healed, where they have been healed, where we can pat ourselves on the back, but also look at the wounds that still need to be addressed and where those areas of life are hindering us from moving forward. So let's begin with the Venus square Neptune-Saturn retrograde conjunction elementally. When Venus is in Cancer, our desire turns to one of either wanting to nurture or wanting to be nurtured. We either want to mother or want to be mothered by someone else. And obviously this will depend on where Cancer's at in your chart. So a square is of the nature of Mars. So whenever we get a square involved, there's a challenge being provoked. And so the storyline that's happening with the Neptune-Saturn conjunction retrograde in Aries is all about doing. It's all about pioneering. That's kind of the archetypal stereotype that's attributed to Aries, is the pioneer. It's the doer. It's the go-getter. And so when Neptune is retrograde in Aries, Neptune retrograde is basically pulling the fog back that Neptune put over us in terms of our go-getter storyline in our spirituality. And it's asking us to revisit where we have descended and gotten off of our spiritual path and where we have become too disillusioned with the transcendental and not put enough time into the physical. Now, Saturn retrograde in Aries does a similar type of action, and that's what's interesting about this conjunction happening with Venus also being retrograde. When Saturn is in Aries, it's in its fall. And essentially, when Saturn's in direct motion in Aries, we get this storyline where Saturn's like, I know the bricks of this building you're trying to build are really hot, but you need to just keep pounding the bricks down and doing it. When Saturn's in retrograde, Saturn then asks us, where did we stop building because we presumed that the bricks that we had already touched are too hot to continue building on? And it's essentially asking us, where have we not done the work to be go-getters, to be doers in the Aryan section of our chart? And where do we need to evaluate where our own responsibility and accountability is coming with, basically? So when Venus is challenged by that conjunction, we basically have these desires to nurture, mother, or be nurtured, or be mothering that are challenging our ability in our spiritual path and the area of our chart that's dominated by Aries. Where have we not been putting in the work? So now we basically can't nurture, or we can't be nurtured. And in order for us to get on that Venetian side of achieving that nurturing and that mothering that we either seek to provide or seek to receive, we need to pay attention to what the retrograde of Saturn and Neptune's conjunction is showing us. Where have we gotten too far off our path? Where have we not put in the work? Where have we gotten too deluded and disillusioned with how things could be going forward that we assumed that somebody else was going to do the work for us? Now, all of this is playing out while Venus is also quincunxing Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. Pluto retrograde in Aquarius has already been revisiting and reviewing karmic imprints on our collective nature in the Aquarian section of our chart. So when Venus quincunxes Pluto in Aquarius, it's essentially like we know that there's change that needs to happen, but that pulsating quincunx, nobody wins. It's a push and pull dynamic. And as I teach my students, quincunxes encourage us to be able to articulate problems and analyze them, but then sit in the discomfort because we're not at a point celestially or personally to conquer the problem, so to speak. So when Venus is quincunxing Pluto, it's like we see that there is an issue in the Aquarian section of our chart that's been embedded in us from a collective conscious programming perspective, but we don't really know how to wrap our hands around where it's going and how to basically get into that receiving Venetian area of our life. Now, we also have Mars quincunxing Chiron. Now, if you remember, Chiron just went retrograde a couple days ago, so we're reviewing these childhood wounds that are still emanating with us into adulthood and looking at where we've healed a lot and where we still need to heal even more. Now, all of this comes off of this Mercury cazimi that we had yesterday, and if you look at the chart, essentially by whole sign house, the Mercury retrograde and all of that action is trining Chiron and Aries. It's also trining Neptune and Saturn. And again, this is by whole sign house. We're not looking at degree. We're just looking at the general elemental energy. So what this suggests is that this is a benefic opportunity. These planets are all working together. Even though Saturn and Neptune are retrograde, Chiron's retrograde, there's a movement that's happening with that Mercury retrograde and that subsequent Mercury cazimi that's allowing us to move through those challenges that those other retrogrades are offering, because Mercury is giving us data. We just don't know how to act on it. And that brings us to our Mars quincunxing Chiron. When Mars is in Virgo, we want to get out there. We want to be very strategic about how we do things. And essentially, that Mercury cazimi we had yesterday gave us insight on how to be more authentic in our lives, where we need to show up more authentically. But essentially, that Mars quincunxing Chiron is like, okay, but I have this wound that's preventing me from stepping into that authenticity. And with the quincunx with Mars, we want to go. But again, quincunx, we don't have a solution for it. So we're not at a point to act on it. We just kind of have to acknowledge it and see, oh, wow, this is the problem. I don't really know how to solve it yet. And so the quincunx gives us like a prompt, essentially, to meditate on. I see the problem. I see how this childhood wound is impeding my forward motion and my drive in life. So what do? Well, you meditate on it, because there's not really an opportunity just yet until we get to that opposition for us to act on it. Now, all of this is happening with the moon in Scorpio. And with the moon in Scorpio, that means our emotional body is being asked to take dark moments of our emotional space and transmute them into light. So this plays into the Chiron retrograde as well, because we're looking at wounds and we're getting all of this action with these retrogradations, whether it's the Neptune-Saturn retrogradation or it's the Chiron and then Mercury retrogradations. We're getting all these retrogrades, so the moon in Scorpio is asking us to really reflect and look at our emotions and what needs to change going forward. Now, here's the thing, by whole sign house, Venus is also trining the North Node and the Moon. So wherever our emotional body is at, wherever we're feeling like these changes need to happen, wherever we're feeling like we have this desire to nurture, it's all in accordance with our soul's destiny. This is all moving us forward and advancing our life path forward, because a trine is of the nature of Jupiter. So we're expanding. And so with Venus, the Moon, and North Node in Pisces, all of these emotional feelings that we're all going through right now are getting us closer to our soul's destiny. Now, hopefully all of that makes sense. I had to talk about it kind of quick because I want to fit this into a video that will upload to TikTok. If you are interested in these spiritual narratives more, or you want to dive into how this applies to you specifically, please, I encourage you to join my class. You can click the RSVPify link in my bio. And we go through the energies last week, this week, and we do a lot of personal readings. We do a lot of like, here's my chart, here's the transit, I had this weird story that came up, so how does this make sense for me? And then we work through it. We essentially treat the astrology like a math problem, but it's a spiritual math problem. And there's always kind of a solution. There's at least a shape of a true answer to the equation. And we like to really do that. So if you're interested in that, I hope to see you in class. And if not, I'll see you in the next video. Please leave comments below if you were confused about anything. I'm happy to dive into more elements of all of these transits and aspects we discussed and how they might be manifesting in your life.